Welcome everyone to our final day of Opening the Gates to Awakening, sponsored by Mid-America Buddhist Association, Maba Monastery in Augusta, Missouri, just outside St. Louis. Today's guest Dharma teacher is Venerable Thubten Chodron, Abbess of Sravasti Abbey in Newport, Washington State, less than 2 hours from Spokane. Venerable Thubten Chodron is author, teacher, and the founder of Sravasti Abbey, a pioneering Tibetan Buddhist training monastery for Western nuns and monks in the United States. She graduated from UCLA and did graduate work in education at USC. Ordained as a Tibetan Buddhist nun in 1977, she studied extensively with His Holiness the Dalai Lama and other Tibetan teachers. She received her full ordination as a bhikkhuni in 1986. Venerable Chodron travels worldwide and is known for her warm, practical, and humorous explanations of how to apply Buddhist teachings in daily life. On a personal note, I can say that she is someone who helped me to regain my interest in Tibetan Buddhism. She is also involved in prison outreach and interfaith dialogue. She's published many books on Buddhist philosophy and meditation and is currently assisting His Holiness the Dalai Lama in writing and publishing the Library of Wisdom and Compassion, a multi-volume series of teachings on the Buddhist past. Visit thubtenchodron.org for a media library of her teachings, and you can visit sravasti.org to learn more about Sravasti Abbey. The title of her talk today is Generosity of the Heart, the Four Brahmaviharas. As she says as a intro, we all wish to live with generosity and open hearts, but how can we overcome greed, anger, and apathy when they get in our way? We now turn the program over to Venerable Thubten Chodron.
Hey, greetings, everybody. Amitabha. So I'm sorry I'm late. And I just want to start by saying that I was very pleasantly surprised to receive an invitation from MABA, Mid-America Buddhist Association, to give a talk in their series of talks right now, because I lived at MABA in Missouri in 2002. I lived there for a year. And, it's changed a lot. I've looked at their website now, and wow, they have new buildings and they've remodeled old buildings, and it's really quite fantastic. So our internet is out. We're, streaming on a cell phone, on a hotspot. So I don't have the opportunity to see all the people who are at MABA and who are attending the talks. So I'm sorry I can't see you, but to all my old MABA friends, I send you many warm greetings, and I hope you're all well. And I thank Jiru and Venerable Kongji for all their kindness. So we will today. I was asked to talk about generosity of the heart, the four Brahmaviharas. So I really like that title, the generosity of the heart, to make your heart generous, to just open your heart and not, have this mind that says, but if I give, I won't have. And if I do something for somebody else, then they'll later take advantage of me. And all these kinds of fears and hesitations that we have about really opening our heart to other living beings, when the fact of the matter is that we're all trying to survive in this ocean of samsara at the same time, and we're all trying to get out of this ocean of samsara together. So rather than harm each other and get in each other's way and be afraid of each other. We really need to come together and work together, for our individual benefit and for the benefit of the world and the universe and all sentient beings in it. Yeah. So I always like to start talks with just a couple of minutes of silence so we can generate our motivation and calm our mind. So what I just said was a bit of an introduction. Let's take a couple of minutes, come home to our breath, and then we will really begin the talk in earnest. So since we'll be listening to a talk on love and compassion, joy and equanimity, let's have a motivation that incorporates those. And so let's think that we'll listen and share it together this evening so we can learn how to actually love living beings and distinguish genuine love from sticky attachment. And may our motivation also be to learn how to create actual compassion for other living beings instead of personal distress or wanting to control them. So we have the potential to create these mental states in ourselves. Those seeds are already there. We need to water them and fertilize them and nourish them so that they will grow into the love and compassion, joy and equanimity of the holy beings. So let's have that be our motivation for sharing together this evening. So the second part of the title, the first part was generosity of the heart, and the second part was the four Brahmaviharas. So the term Brahmaviharas is a term found mostly in the Pali tradition, because these are four mental states that are cultivated by Brahma, and also by cultivating them and developing the level of concentration on them, then it can become a cause to be born in the Brahma realms. That Brahma realms are in the form realm. Okay. In the Tibetan tradition, and I think the Chinese tradition, the term is usually the four immeasurables. And here, immeasurable because you're trying to cultivate these four attitudes or thoughts or emotions towards an immeasurable number of sentient beings in an immeasurable space. And may these four qualities be developed to an immeasurable extent, so they're very broad and vast. What's quite interesting is that these four are found in the Pali tradition and in the Sanskrit tradition. Okay. Some people think, oh, the Pali Buddhism, that's Theravada. Sanskrit tradition, that's Zen. And Tibetan is some other weird kind of something. And Pure Land and Huayan and all the other Chinese things, we don't know about them. Because in America, we have Vipassana and Zen and Vajrayana. Okay, and people think that those are the three yanas, the three vehicles. Well, that's according to some Americans. It's not according to the scriptures. Okay. In the scriptures, we talk about the fundamental vehicle, and that could be, this is one way of delineating the vehicles. And the fundamental vehicle are the basic teachings that Buddha teaches, the Vinaya, the Four Noble Truths, and so forth. And those teachings are what are taught and practiced by the Shravakas, the hearers, and the Pratyeka Buddhas, and the solitary realizers. And then the Sanskrit tradition. Well, it gets very, very sticky here. Let me stick to one classification system first. So we have the hearers, Shravakas, solitary realizers, Pratyeka Buddhas, and then we have the Bodhisattvas. Okay. Then sometimes, so that's the way the three vehicles are delineated in the scriptures. The last one isn't actually called the Bodhisattva vehicles because it also includes one of the paths of the Buddhas. Okay. But sometimes what we do for ease is we talk about the Pali tradition and the Sanskrit tradition being the rough teachings that were expressed in these two different languages. But it gets really sticky if you say the Pali tradition, that's only that's the Theravada, and that is only for the Shravakas and solitary realizers, because actually in the Pali vehicle, there are teachings on how for Bodhisattva and how to practice as a Bodhisattva and become a Buddha. Similarly, in the Sanskrit tradition, you have the general Mahayana teachings, but they are based on the fundamental vehicle teachings. And the Vajrayana is not some other weird kind of who knows what. It's actually a branch of the Mahayana, in the same way that Zen is a branch of Mahayana, Pure Land, Hua Hin, all these different traditions are branches of Mahayana. And so Vajrayana is a Mahayana tradition, and it's also practiced on the basis of the Four Truths and, the teachings that the Shravakas and solitary realizers practice. And I say this because there's so much confusion in the West, and people sometimes thinking that these teachings are completely separate traditions with no teachings in common, and even thinking that some of these teachings were not taught by the Buddha, they were made up by other people later. Okay. So there's so many of these kinds of misunderstandings. And when you look at something like the four Brahmaviharas, AKA the four immeasurables, here you see a teaching that is found across the board. Yeah, the Shravakas practice it, the solitary realizers practice it, the Bodhisattvas practice it, it's practiced in Theravada, it's practiced in Mahayana, it's practiced in Vajrayana, and so it's, there are actually many, many teachings that are found in all of the Buddhist traditions that we often don't recognize are there, And I'll give you one example. I think it was in 1993, His Holiness Dalai Lama was giving some teachings in Arizona. And he was teaching during the day, and then in the evening, he asked different people to give Dharma talks. Okay, so one of the people who gave Dharma talks was Sharon Salzberg. So we know, if you know Sharon at all, she loves the metta meditation. She loves the four Brahmaviharas. So she gave a talk about that. Okay. And it was a beautiful talk. But afterwards, one of my friends who was a Tibetan practitioner, he was an Inji, but who had studied Buddhism for years and years and years, and was a scholar and was a practitioner, commented to me saying, "Oh, I didn't know that the Theravada talked about the four immeasurables." That was an incredible talk that she gave, but I had no idea that, those people practice that. And I thought, wow, what a good example of people not knowing about the other, traditions and the teachings found in them, thinking that they're totally, separate. And so when I helped His Holiness Dalai Lama write the book, Buddhism, One Teacher, Many Traditions, I did a lot of research on the Theravada tradition because I have Theravada friends. And I also did research on the Chinese tradition because I have many friends who practice Chinese Buddhism. And what was so amazing to me was how much content it was in all three traditions, all the traditions, sometimes expressed in different ways, okay, but it was there, and you could very easily see how the teachings in one tradition were built upon the teachings in another tradition, okay, that they weren't, separate things that were unrelated. So, for example, with the four Brahmaviharas, okay, those teachings are found, across the board. Now, what about bodhicitta? Yeah, the mind aspiring to become a Buddha for the benefit of sentient beings. Now, some people say, oh, that's just some Mahayana thing. Okay, yeah. They don't know that in the Theravada tradition, there's a scripture written by Dharmapada, yeah, about the paramita practice, the paramis, and how to progress as a bodhisattva. People don't know that. And they also don't realize that all the teachings about bodhicitta are based on the four Brahmaviharas. Yeah. And bodhicitta isn't some weird thing that was made up afterwards. If you know the Brahmaviharas well, their natural extension, yeah, for some people is going to be bodhicitta. Okay. And, it's the same way in terms of describing anatta or no self. Yeah. If you study them in, let's say, the Pali tradition, how it's explained in the Pali canon and those commentaries, then you can see how, let's say, the view of the Indian Mahayana masters, Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, and so on, are just an extension of that. And it becomes very obvious that Nagarjuna studied the same sutras that are in the Pali Canon. Yeah. And some of the same arguments are there in Nagarjuna's teachings as in the Pali Canon on no self. Okay. So it was quite wonderful for me to really see some, how the traditions came together in so many ways, and every once in a while I would be reading something, maybe in the Udana, it's one of the Pali scriptures, and it sounded exactly like Nagarjuna. I was going, whoa, what's happening here? It was really beautiful to see those kind of similarities. Okay, so this evening, when I talk about the four Brahmaviharas, I'm going to explain them following how Buddhaghosa does it. He's one of the great Pali teachers. He lived in India around the 5th, 6th century AD, actually. So he was alive several centuries after Nagarjuna. And the way he, in the Visuddhimagga, the path of purification, yeah, I think it's the whole first chapter, he talks about, he has a big explanation about the Pali, about the four Brahmaviharas. So I'm going to talk about that and then bring it into how the four Brahmaviharas, four measurables, are found in the Tibetan tradition. And, so similar, and a few little things that are a little bit different. Okay, so what I'm using as a guide is that His Holiness Dalai Lama and I worked together, or should I say, I edited the teachings of His Holiness to write a whole series of books called The Library of Wisdom and Compassion. And volume 5 is called In Praise of Great Compassion. So I'm going to be following the teachings in there, because in the Library of Wisdom and Compassion, His Holiness was very clear. He wanted teachings from the Pali tradition and also from the Chinese Mahayana. Okay, the cover has Chenrezig on it, Avalokiteshvara Kuan Yin. Okay, and now some people think, oh, that's just Tibetan. Well, this drawing is how it's Chenrezig looks, and one of the ways Chenrezig looks in Tibetan art. Okay. But there's 1,000, and this one is 1,000-armed Chenrezig. There's also 2-armed, there's also 4-armed. In Chinese Buddhism, there's similarly 2-armed, 4-armed, 1,000-armed, many different versions of Kuan Yin. Sometimes Kuan Yin's a male, sometimes a female, but the qualities are all the same. Okay. Now people might say, oh, but in Theravada, we don't have that. Well, I stayed at a Theravada monastery in Thailand when I was doing research on this book. And the abbot there, he was going to build a temple for Kuan Yin. It was a Theravada monastery. He himself personally had a very strong connection to Kuan Yin. He had gone to Putosan, where that's Chenrezig's or Avalokiteshvara's island in China. And he had, these different signs and a very strong connection with Kuan Yin. So he was going to build a temple. And I, after staying at his monastery, I was going to Dharamsala. I was going to be seeing His Holiness. So the abbot gave me some plates of bronze metal to take to His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, so His Holiness could inscribe something on it and then bring the copper plates back, and they would be melted down and used to make the statue of Kuan Yin for the temple that he was building at his Theravada monastery for Kuan Yin. Okay, so yeah, it really shows, the meeting of the minds across the traditions. Yeah. Okay. So this particular volume, it's called In Praise to Great Compassion. We start out talking about the 4 Brahmaviharas, the 4 immeasurables, and then we go into the altruistic intention of bodhicitta, how there's 2 ways of cultivating it in the Sanskrit tradition, and then the Chinese have their own way, again in the Sanskrit tradition, of cultivating bodhicitta. And then we talked about the aspiring and engaging bodhicitta, and and then a final chapter on bodhicitta and bodhisattvas in the Pali tradition. Okay. And I also remember, Geshe-la, if I can tell this little story about you, when we were going through the manuscript for the book, because Geshe-la was, helping me correct everything and make sure that what I wrote was correct. One of the chapters was talking about the 4 great vows that you find in Chinese Buddhism. Sometimes there's even 5 great vows in Chinese Buddhism. And Geshe-la read those and he said, because we don't have them in the delineated as the 4 great vows. And he read them and he said, these are wonderful. Yeah. And again, you didn't know about them before, but he read them and he says, these are wonderful. And I completely agree, So there's so much we can learn from each other in this way. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to be talking about love, compassion, empathic joy, and equanimity. Okay, so the path of purification says that love has the aspect of friendliness as its characteristic. Its function is to promote friendliness. It is manifested as the disappearance of malice and annoyance. Its proximate cause is seeing others as lovable. When it succeeds, it eliminates malice. When it fails, it degenerates into selfish, affectionate desire. There is a lot in those few short sentences. Okay, so he says it has the aspect of friendliness. That's how he's defining it. In the Tibetan tradition, we define love as the wish for, or the aspiration for sentient beings to have happiness and the causes of happiness. So the definition is a little bit different. But when you hear about how to cultivate it, you see that it comes very much to the same point. So Buddhaghosa isn't just saying, oh yeah, love means being friendly. So you're cheerful and you go around, you say hello to everybody and become everybody's friends and the most popular person around. No, that's not what Buddhaghosa means by love, or being friendly in that way. What he's meaning is really opening our heart and seeing the beauty in others and wanting them to be happy. Okay. Okay, so it functions to promote friendliness. It functions to promote an open heart, to a mind that, as its general way of operating when we meet other beings, is a mind that wishes others well. Okay. Now we have to look closely at our own minds here. Is this our usual way of interacting with people? When we first meet people or animals or insects, are we approaching them with a mind that wishes them well? Or do we approach others with a little bit of suspicion? Like, who are they? How are they going to treat me? Are they bigoted? Do they agree with my ideas or not? Are they going to hurt me? I've been abused before. Are they going to abuse me? Are they going to take advantage of me? Yeah. Should I be afraid of them? How much distance do I need to keep? If we look in our minds, we usually have some degree of this kind of thought. Yeah. We usually don't approach living beings with a blank slate, thinking, here's a living being who wants happiness and not suffering. And we have a lot in common just by that fact, because the most important thing to me is also to have happiness and not suffering. We don't approach living beings that way. We approach them with very often, and people are different here, with some guard. Yeah, according to our past experiences, according to what we were taught, maybe by our family or whatever ethnic, racial, or religious group we belong to. Yeah. And, we have different levels of caution and suspicion. Okay. When we approach others in that way, yeah, is there a generosity of heart? There's not, is there? Yeah. And that fear is really, it's part of our self-centered mind, and it really blocks us. Yeah, because already before we know somebody, we're projecting fear and danger and such on them. And we don't even know who they are. Yeah. But our self-centered mind caught the ball and is running with it. And it really interferes with our relationships. Okay. So Buddhaghosa says, love is manifested as the disappearance of malice and annoyance. Yeah. How often are we with people without having either malice or annoyance? Okay. Even people we were very attached to, who we're very fond of, like one small thing happens, whammo, we have malice, we have annoyance. Yeah. Sometimes people are only trying to help us, but they don't help us in the way we want to be helped. So we get mad at them. We get annoyed with them. But actually, their motivation is to be of assistance. But I want them to assist by, whatever the project is, by doing the steps 1, 2, 3, 4. And their way of doing that project is kind of reversing different steps, making the steps a little bit different. It comes out the same, but it looks different in the process. But I want them to do it my way. Yeah. And that attachment to my way, then we get annoyed when people aren't doing it my way. Yeah. And it's very interesting, think in your life how often that happens to you, where you get annoyed with people. Yeah. Because you want them to cut the carrots like this, and they're cutting the carrots like that. Okay. And you want roast potatoes, and they're making fried potatoes. And these things sound very funny when you talk about them in Dharma class, but these are things that people quarrel about. Yeah. And, if we quarrel about these minor things, look at what's going on in the country where, Congress people can't do anything together anymore, it seems like. All they can do together is decide to hate somebody else. And that we can see very clearly is how harmful that is to the country, how we really need more cooperation. Yeah. Okay. So when we really have love, it manifests as the disappearance of malice and annoyance. So malice is when we want to harm somebody. We want somebody to experience difficulties. Annoyance is when we just don't like what they're doing and we want them to change. Okay. How often do you get annoyed during one day? Oh my goodness. I don't know about you, but very easy to get annoyed, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So when love succeeds, it eliminates malice. Yeah. And the proximate cause of love is seeing others as lovable. How do we see other sentient beings as lovable? How do we get over that hump of all of our suspicion and hesitation and fear and preconceptions that we project on others? How do we see them as lovable? Well, one of the meditations in the Tibetan tradition that we use is to meditate on the kindness of sentient beings. Yeah. And this, I know personally for me, has been a very powerful meditation that has really changed how I think and how I am as a person. Okay. And interestingly, I just got an email today from somebody I don't know who was on the web and found a guided meditation that I led about gratitude. And this person wrote and said, I've had a lot of anger for my parents. They failed me in many ways when I was a child and when I grew up. But your meditation made me see that they actually gave me a good foundation for being a human being. And I'm going to call and thank them for that. Wow. Yeah. He listened to one meditation on gratitude and like that, you know? So that's when we can see what he was able to see that changed his mind was, yes, his parents had their limitations. Everybody has limitations, but they did the best they could. Given their limitations, given their own fears, and so on, they did what they could because they cared for their child, and he's seeing it kind of for the first time. And this, I know, was very much what happened with me, with my parents too. I went from really taking them for granted, and thinking that it all revolved around me, to really seeing what the kindness that they had given. Okay. So this isn't just seeing the kindness of parents, but also the kindness of people we don't know. Because when we cultivate love, we want it not just to the people that we find nice, who agree with our ideas and want to help us. We want to be able to look and have love and affection for everybody. Okay. So we have to think also about strangers. Okay. And what's their experience? So right now at Sravasti Abbey, I told you our email has been broken. Internet, I'm sorry. Yeah, our internet has been broken. And one of the nuns called the PUD today, and they came out and they discovered that the way the fiber optic coil was installed, I'm saying it right, was faulty. And those guys have been working out there, digging a really big ditch from one side to the other. When did they start? Okay, so they got here this morning. They've been digging the ditch since around 2. Okay, it's quite a bit past 2 now. It's dark outside, it's cold outside, and they're still digging the ditch. Okay, now, do we know these people? Anybody ever met who they are? Would you recognize them in a crowd? Do you know what they like, what they don't like, if they're happy in their life, if they're miserable? We don't know any of that. Yeah. But we know they want happiness and not suffering. Yeah. And we know that we're benefiting from the fruits of their labor. Yeah. Because we aren't out there in the cold and the dark digging the ditch and repairing the fiber optics. Yeah, they're doing it and we benefit. We're inside, warm, cozy, well fed, yeah, listening to a Dharma talk, and they're out there working and we're the ones benefiting from what they're doing, even though we don't know them. Yeah. When you think about it, that's remarkable, isn't it? Yeah. And when we look at our life all around us, there's so many beings whose efforts we experience the fruit of, and we don't even know them. And most of the time, we don't even bother to thank them. In fact, we don't even acknowledge their kindness. We brush it off by saying, well, they're just doing it because they get paid. They're not doing it for me because they like me. They're doing it because they want to earn some money for their family. It doesn't matter. that they're not our best friends and they don't know us. What matters is that they're working hard and we're benefiting from it. Yeah. And it would make perfect sense for us all to go out there and say thank you. Yeah. And one of the nuns isn't here right now. I asked her about, getting some snacks and tea for the guys. So I think she's doing that. But, there's so many instances in our life of people we don't know who work very, very hard and whose energies we benefit from. I mean, look at it. Do you know the people who grew the food you ate today? Do you know the people who made the water system? Yeah, that you got fresh, clean water. Yeah, I was reading about Kirsten in Ukraine. Used to be quite a large city. There's no potable water now. The Russians destroyed, the water pump. There's no electricity. It's freezing cold there. The temperatures are going below zero. Yeah. And here we have water and food. We're in a warm place. We don't have to fear people are bombing us. Yeah. And that's because of the kindness of other living beings. And so to really see that this world actually has a lot of kindness in it. It is, yes, there are problems galore. And yes, there are people who have rotten motivations. But rotten motivations does not make the person themselves rotten. If every time somebody had a rotten motivation, we decided that, they were worthless, then everybody would be worthless, including ourselves, because we don't always have pure motivations, do we? We can be conniving, we can take advantage of others. Yeah, we can manipulate. So we have to, if we're going to open our hearts to love others, we have to see their kindness and we have to differentiate their actions from the person, so that a person may have a rotten motivation, they may do a harmful action, but the person themselves is not evil. Okay, we always talk like that. You may think of one politician or another, oh, that guy's a jerk, and we call them some kind of name. And we talk about it as, as if they themselves are deficient in some way. Actually, what it is it's something about their motivation or it's something about their actions. But the person has the potential to become a fully awakened Buddha. So we can't just say, they're rotten, they don't deserve love. Yeah. Why should I love them? Look what they do to the country. Look what they've done to me. Look what they've done to my family. Yeah, if we live our whole life like that, we're drowning in a bunch of grievances, in a bunch of grudges. And that just makes us totally miserable. Yeah, because the mind is so filled with malice. Yeah. So, when we talk about generating love, the big enemy to generating love is our anger. Yeah. Our anger that does, just wants to blame others for our problems. Now you may say, but they deserve to be blamed. They are the cause of my problems. Okay. And then your Buddhist teacher will come along and say, do you believe in the law of karma and its effects? and you say yes. And then your teacher says, then why are you blaming another person or an animal or an insect for your unhappiness? You mean it has nothing to do with your own actions, with your own karma that you created? And then you go, because you see that your teacher's right. Yeah. But it's interesting, isn't it, how we say, oh, I believe in karma. But when we have some misfortune, oh, we're innocent. It's always somebody else's fault. Yeah. No, we created the cause, maybe earlier this life, maybe in a previous life, but we created the cause to be in that situation. And the other person just happens to be the condition, for the ripening of the karma. But we created the karma. Yeah. So we can't just kind of lean back and say, all my problems come from other people. Well, you can say that if you want, but that's not going to help you. That's not going to help anybody else. It's going to make us miserable. Okay. So that's a little bit about love. Okay. I want to move on because otherwise we won't get through all four. Okay. There's also, when sometimes we talk about the near enemy and the far enemy of each of the four measurables. So first of all, there's a chart that I put in the book, okay? So for love, the characteristic of love is the sincere wish for the welfare and happiness of beings. So that's what Buddhaghosa means by friendliness. Yeah, sincere wish for the welfare of and happiness of beings. The near enemies means something that is similar to that, one of the four immeasurables of the Brahmaviharas. It looks similar, but actually it isn't. Okay, so that's the near enemy. So the near enemy of love is personal attachment, worldly affection, clinging or possessive love. So this in our society is what we call love. But from a Buddhist perspective, it's very often the near enemy of what actual love is. Because it is, it's very clear, kind of personal attachment. I love you because, and then there are a list of requirements to earn my love. And so it's not love, it's attachment. Because attachment exaggerates the good qualities of somebody, and then we don't want to be separated from them. Okay. So this kind of love, I love you because, okay, well, you love me back. You're nice to me. You agree with my ideas. You compliment me. Yeah. When I'm in a good mood, you are in a good mood too, and we have a good time. When I'm in a bad mood, you encourage me, and you try and you listen to me when I feel upset, even though I'm acting abominably. You will listen to me and still hug and kiss me. So I love you. You hate the same people I hate. You will always stick up for me in an argument. You agree with all my ideas. Okay. And based on that checklist, then we say, I love you. Yeah. But that's not what the Buddha's talking about when he talks about love. Yeah. He's talking about seeing sentient beings as valuable not because they help me and are wonderful to me, yeah, but simply because they're alive, yeah, and seeing them as worthwhile living beings, even if we disagree with them about very important topics. Okay. So we have to be careful for the near enemy of love, because when we get attached to people, we think we're in love. And then what happens later on? Yeah. Everybody here been in love at one time or another? You've been in love, you know, oh, that person is just so wonderful. Oh. And then some time goes by and you get mad at them and they do things you don't like and they betray your trust and then you can't stand them. Yeah. The kind of, so that is very indicative of there having been attachment. Yeah. What the Buddha is talking about when he talks about love is you don't have a situation where you stop loving somebody, because your love is not based on how they're acting towards you. Yeah. The wish is just a pure wish that they have happiness and its causes. That's it. Okay. So there's a lot to really look at here in terms of looking at our own relationships. And, what does it mean really to love people? Hmm? Okay. Then next one, compassion. So Buddhaghosa says, compassion has the aspect of allaying, or allaying? How do you pronounce it? Allaying? Okay, of allaying suffering for its characteristic. Okay, so it has the aspect of helping to soothe suffering. Okay. Its function is to find others' suffering unbearable. Now, unbearable here does not mean that we go, oh, they're so sick. They look awful when they're sick. I can't bear to look at them. So I'm not going to go to the hospital to see them because I can't bear seeing them so sick. That is not what he means by finding others' suffering unbearable. Because when we get to that state where, oh, I don't want to see them because it upsets me, you don't have compassion for them. You have distress for your own self. So again, here we see our self-centered attitude rearing its head. Yeah. It's like, oh, I love my dog, but now it's dying and it's in so much pain and I can't stand to see it in so much pain. So I'm going to euthanize it and put it out of its suffering. You hear this all the time. Yeah. When we asked one of my teachers what he thought about euthanizing our pets, he said, if you have the clairvoyant powers and you know where that sentient being will be reborn after you euthanize them, and you know that they will have a good rebirth, then if you euthanize them, you're not increasing their suffering because they will have a good rebirth. But if you don't know where they're going to be reborn, and there's a good chance that they could be reborn in the lower realms again, because they're now an animal and it's difficult to create virtue as an animal. So if you don't know where they're going to be reborn, although you may think you're putting them out of suffering by euthanizing them. You may be sending them to another rebirth where they experience more suffering. You know? And so there, the thing is, I care about my pet. I can't stand to see them suffer. And it's going into personal distress of, I don't like seeing them suffer. So we stop their suffering by euthanizing, but it could actually be sending the pet that we adore to a worse rebirth. Okay. So when it says this word of finding others suffering unbearable, it comes at the same word unbearable comes in the Mahayana, that the bodhisattvas find sentient beings suffering unbearable. But unbearable does not mean that we have personal distress, that we're panicky and we want to cover our eyes and we don't want to look. Okay. Actually, having compassion, it takes incredible courage. Some people think compassion just means being a wimp. You're so compassionate that you say, oh, yes, it's okay. You can, like the husband beats the wife, but she's compassionate and, oh dear, yeah, you beat me to a pulp and I have a black eye and a broken rib, but I know you love me, so it's okay. You can beat me again tonight, because I have compassion for you. I know you have an anger problem. Is that compassion? Yeah, I think that's stupidity. Yeah. If your husband is beating you, you need to say that is not acceptable behavior. Yeah, I care about you, but that behavior is not acceptable. And it's stopping. And, you need to go see a counselor. In the meantime, I'm leaving, or whatever you decide to do. Yeah. So, being compassionate doesn't mean, yeah, I forgive everybody. It's okay. You can take advantage of me. That's fine. No, it doesn't mean that. Okay. Yeah. But it also doesn't mean you go and punch the guy and you say, you're such a jerk, wham, wham. Okay. So don't give yourself two extreme ways of thinking or two extreme behaviors. Yeah. There's always many different ways we can handle situations and many different ways that we can change our attitude so that it's not a non-virtuous one. Okay. So let's come back. Compassion has the aspect of allaying suffering. Its function is to find others' suffering unbearable. Unbearable because they're in pain. Not unbearable because we feel terrible watching them in pain. It's because they are in pain and we don't want them to experience pain. Okay, so compassion manifests as non-cruelty and non-violence. So we don't act in cruel ways, we don't act in violent ways. We can be verbally violent, we can be physically violent. It all stems from mental violence, from malice, anger, hatred in our own mind. Okay. But verbal violence can be extremely painful. Okay. And physical violence can also. Yeah. When I was a kid, yeah, my parents very, very seldom did we get hit. Extremely seldom. But we got screamed at, when we did something wrong. And my mother tells the story of when I was a little kid, and I don't know who knows what I did, and she was screaming at me. I said, "Please stop screaming, just hit me," because that's how much the verbal violence hurt. Yeah, so we need to be careful with this thing. And also this thing, because in our letters, in our internet, we can be very violent. Okay, so verbal violence and physical violence. Compassion is the opposite of those two. Okay. When we talk about nonviolence, that's ahimsa. That was what Gandhi practiced, when he was working for India's independence. He practiced ahimsa, nonviolence. It's what Martin Luther King practiced. It's what His Holiness Dalai Lama is practicing for Tibet. Okay, it's possible. Possible. So its proximate cause is seeing helplessness in those overwhelmed by suffering. Okay. So it's seeing helplessness in those overwhelmed by suffering. Okay, so here's somebody who's totally out of control with anger. Well, it happened again today. There was another school shooting today, okay, at University of Virginia. And there was somebody who had been in the football team a few years ago. A group of people from the university were going on a field trip. When they came back, they were in this bus in a parking lot on the UVA campus. And I don't know, they don't have the details yet, if this guy was on the bus or off the bus, but he shot and killed 3 other students who were all football players, like he was, and injured 2 more students. Yeah. Now, when you think of that, and the pictures of the 3 guys who got killed, it's like these bright, shining smiles on them. They were formal pictures, but they were kids with genuine smiles, not that kind of smile, fake smiles. Okay. And they were all killed. And we tend to look and say, oh, this guy, who killed the other ones, he's terrible. He's evil. Yeah, he should be destroyed. Actually, he just destroyed his own life. Yeah, he's going to get imprisoned for a long time for this. Okay, but do we see him as suffering? Do we see helplessness in those overwhelmed by suffering when we think of somebody who murdered other innocent people? Yeah. Do we see them as suffering? Can we look in their hearts and see them as suffering? Can we look into Putin's heart? When you see a picture of Putin, you can tell he's not a very happy person. He might be an arrogant person. He might be a powerful person. But how many times have you seen pictures of Putin smiling? Yeah. There's usually some kind of twisted grimace on his face. Here's somebody who actually has a lot of suffering. And he thinks that by invading another country and taking it over and restoring Russia to his idea of the previous Russian Empire, he thinks that will make him happy. Yeah. And it might make other people happy too, he thinks. And he will be proclaimed as the great unifier of the Russian people. Yeah. Is this a sentient being who's overwhelmed by suffering? In my mind, if you invade another country and you don't care for the suffering of the people, you know, the suffering you and your side are inflicting on the people, you know, then you are suffering a lot. Yeah. You're suffering from ignorance, anger, and attachment. You're suffering from malice and spite and vengeance. Yeah. And you're helpless in face of your own afflictions. You cannot see clearly. And although you want happiness, I mean, what does Putin want? He wants happiness. Is he creating the cause of happiness? No. You know, the blood of so many people is on his hands, because even though he is not directly killing them, he is ordering other people to do that. When you order somebody to do something negative, you accumulate that same karma when they do the action. So he's actually accumulating so much negative karma because he's the boss of the whole operation. Yeah. And rejoices at the killing of other people. He's totally helpless in front of his afflictions. Do we have compassion for him? Do we see him as somebody who's worthy of compassion? Or do we see him as a vicious enemy who, you know, we hope will get run down or assassinated or who knows what? But if we really looked at him the way the Buddha looks at him, I mean, the Buddha has a tremendous compassion for people like that. Yeah. And when you think about it, you know, why is he doing that? Because he's unhappy and he's trying to be happy and he doesn't know what are the causes of happiness are. And if he were happy, he wouldn't be acting that way. Yeah. So can we have some love for Putin or for whoever we consider an enemy, somebody who may be a personal enemy, they harmed us in the past? Can we have love, wishing them to be happy? Because if they were genuinely happy, they wouldn't be doing things that harm others. Okay. So when compassion succeeds, it reduces cruelty. When it fails, it produces personal distress. We get upset because other people are suffering. When we're upset because they're suffering, we can't do very much to actually help them because our own emotion is has taken over our mind, and we can't control our minds anymore. Yeah. I was a friend of mine had a lung transplant, and afterwards it was touch and go. He lived for some time, but at a certain point, you know, there was just his body was really rejecting the lungs, and he was in ICU. And you know, his wife called me, and I went down to be with him. And you know, they asked him, "Are you ready to die?" You know, and he said, "Yeah." So they unplugged the machine. And the hospital staff was very kind. They wheeled him into another room, so we went into the other room with him. There was me and his wife, his 2 children, and his best friend. And so they were going to detach him from life support. And I was standing near him, giving him instructions on how to think and how to be in the death process. And everybody else who loved him dearly, but it was a kind of love with attachment, and who had tremendous compassion for him. Nobody wanted to see him suffer. But people were overcome with their own personal distress. And so, they were crying. And I was the one kind of helping him and saying things to him and so on while he was dying. But the other people who he was so close to, they were so overcome with their grief for him that they couldn't really help him at that point. Yeah. So we have to be able to differentiate compassion from personal distress and see how personal distress really gets in the way of us helping people when they really need it. Okay, now, actually, we've done 2 of them. We're supposed to stop in 7 minutes, and we were supposed to have a half an hour of Q&A. So, things are not adding up here. So maybe I'll stop, okay? You can maybe read the book about empathic joy and equanimity, but to have a few minutes at least where people can ask questions or give comments.
Came up yesterday as part of the discussion following on from about like empathic distress as well, around how to see huge suffering, poverty and violence and that, and not be moved to being incapacitated by our care or distress, and be able to just be content with the little that we can do, knowing that we can't just change the whole situation as we would wish. How to balance that, opening our heart to the entirety of the situation, recognizing our limitations and being content with what we can do.
Okay, so how to be witness to others' suffering, have compassion and want to do what you can do, but know that you can't snap your fingers and cure their physical suffering immediately. Okay, it's interesting to research in your own mind, to observe that mind that thinks, that gets upset about this, and see that underneath it, there's some kind of idea that I should be able to control other people's lives. Isn't there? I should be able to interfere and stop their suffering. I should be able to, when they are creating the cause for their own suffering, make them stop immediately. Okay, if they're starting a fight, I should be able to stop the fight. If they're being beat up by somebody, I should be able to stop the person who's beating them up. This thing of, thinking that we should be able to control the world, or at least who's in front of our nose. Is that a realistic thought? Yeah, we can't even control our own body and mind. And yet somehow we think yeah, that we should be able to change the situation. And we really want to. We don't want people to suffer. Yeah. I mean, if I could, I would, go into Ukraine right now and with food and water, and I would go fix their electric towers and everything like that. And there I'd fix their heating system. Yeah. I don't have the ability to fix electric towers. All I know about electricity is how to turn the switch and change the light bulb. That's it. Yeah. So I can't just go in and make it change like that. I can look for groups of people, charitable organizations that are taking food and water into Ukraine and make a donation. I can do that. Yeah. But that's not going to stop all their suffering immediately either. Because that can't, with my donation, they're going to be able to feed all the people in Kirsten? I don't think so. Okay. So, to be able to really have that sense of love and compassion for them, but to accept what we are able to do and not able to do, and to use the recognition of our limitations to motivate us to practice and to develop genuine love and compassion, develop genuine bodhicitta. Because if we were able to become a Buddha and manifest in different forms, then we could teach people how to avoid doing actions that create non-virtue. Because the whole source of all this suffering that we want to stop is destructive karma. And if we want to get at the root of it, we have to teach people how to stop creating destructive karma. Yeah. And to actually do that at the root, we have to be able to teach people the path to no self, to selflessness, to emptiness. Okay. To teach people that path accurately, we have to know it ourselves, and we have to eliminate our own defilements, and we have to improve our own conduct. Yeah, so to use, when we see how limited we are in those situations, to use that to energize us to practice. But also be realistic, and none of the Buddhas also can sweep into the situation and rescue everybody. Why not? Yeah, from the side of the Buddha has no hesitation, no limitations. But when sentient beings don't have the karma to be open to the Buddha's enlightening influence, then they can't receive it. Okay. So, even the Buddha can't snap his fingers and make the whole situation change. But I'm sure he's doing something to help people, to teach people about abandoning non-virtue and creating virtue, and how to oppose, grasping at true existence. He is doing that work because we happen to be the fortunate people listening to the teachings. So somehow those teachings are coming through. Yeah. Okay.
A question online from Don Sloan.
Mm-hmm.
Can you say something about how compassion is different from empathy?
Oh, yeah. It's interesting that you say that, because I was just writing a paper for a journal. I was asked to write a paper, and the people who asked, I've said in the paper, I'm explaining from a Buddhist view, and they said, oh, compassion, that sounds like empathy. Yeah, I guess some people in the academic or scientific community, that's how they're talking about it. But to me, empathy is different than compassion, okay? Empathy is, I understand your suffering. Yeah, I understand it very well, you know, either because I am very in touch with my own mind and the way my own mind works, or because I've had a similar experience, or because I've been involved in watching other people go through that experience. So for me, empathy means understanding another person's plight. Okay. And again, as I think of it, you know, empathy you have first, and based on that understanding, then you generate compassion that wishes to alleviate their suffering.
And just a final comment, someone says, I am a Christian who is learning to understand, appreciate, and learn from my Buddhist brothers and sisters. And this is the first lengthy talk on Buddhism that I've heard. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you and welcome. Okay, so we'll dedicate the merit now to all the sentient beings who we want to be free of misery, but we cannot snap our fingers and eliminate it, but we care about them. And because we care, we have love, we will do our best not to contribute to their pain, not to harm them, and to alleviate their pain as much as we can. Okay, so we reinforce those determinations in ourselves. And then the challenge is to remember them when we're starting to get mad. Yeah. And take that anger energy out of the situation. Okay, let's dedicate. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. Okay, good. Bye, everybody at Maba. Thank you.